Thank you to everyone who could make it to the Collaborate session on Thursday night. And for those of you that couldn't, please take a look at the recording. I think it was a great session and really important in terms of the report for A1. Now, this week we are looking at actors. However, if you look through the modules, it's a lot more than actors. We also talk about the sources of conflict again. I can understand that the design, which I'm just going to take a moment to distance myself. I don't actually design the course. I could understand there could be a little bit of confusion because in week 3, what's called origins could also be sources. So this could be a little bit confusing in terms of terminology, but the main thing is to look at the origins as describing and defining what type of conflict it is, using those measures that we have in the models, giving us some background. And then in terms of sources, if you look at that list that is under what says origins in Module 3, there's a list, things like commonly resources, land or territory, some sort of identity-based grievance such as religious or ethnic identity. So that list can also be called sources in your actual report. And obviously sources and origins are going to overlap in the sense of you cannot describe what type of conflict it is, where it came from, and how it started without getting into sources. However, under the section of sources, you would deal with your, in most cases, say 2 main sources of conflict. You deal with them just in that little bit more depth. Now, the main thing I want to reinforce for this week when we're talking about actors is that, in the discussion there's been some great determination of different actors in different conflicts. So this is spot on. I think it's really good. And I think what's good about it is a lot of what's been posted has been very good at categorizing actors to a reasonably high level. You don't really want a list of 20 actors, for example. You can't do much with that. Now, you might say, my conflict is really complex. How can I possibly do that? You can come up with high-level categories in a range of ways. So if there's a number of other countries that were involved in this conflict, you might simply have international actors, or you might have separatist groups, or the government, even though the government might actually drill down into a few different key players, like, in the case of Rwanda, a president. Or, in some cases you might have the media and NGOs, but not in all cases. So my suggestion is, as you do your research and reading, always have a few articles or sources you're using for your actual conflict. Now, you will find there'll be common themes. There'll be certain actors they're all mentioning. So they're the kind of key actors that you want to put in, because it'll be obvious, blindly obvious, if you don't. So that's really what you want to capture. What you want to avoid, as I said, is just a list where you actually don't say anything about them. So I don't want you to say, here's the name of an actor, and literally define who they are. Yes, I want you to do that. But what I want you to do is then say how they contributed to the conflict. Why is this actor important? What is it that scholars are saying about this actor? Would there even be a conflict if this actor hadn't been involved? So say something meaningful and be able to bring in your research. Okay, so by now we've looked at, particularly last week, those origins. We looked at a few different models that should help you actually measure conflict. How do we know it's a conflict, or is it a war, or is it a violent conflict? How do we know that? So, the correlates of war, Uppsala, a greed or grievance model, which one explains it more, and also a little bit about the history and background. Then moving into this week, we started to actually name those common sources of conflict. You might add one that's not on that list. That's okay, but the point is, what is it people are fighting over? And then thirdly, your key actors. Now, in terms of saying something meaningful about your key actors, this is likely to also link to your sources. So if, for example, it's resource claims, who's making a claim and why? Who are the main people? If it's a territorial claim, who's fighting over territory? This is going to tell you something. And perhaps who's on the sideline influencing those players as well. So there are a few key questions that can help you define your actors. So good luck. Your assignment is coming up soon, your reports. Feel free to keep floating ideas on discussion board, but also obviously you can come and talk to me as well. Before you know it, you'll be putting your names down for teams for assignment number 4 as well. But don't despair that it's so close behind assignment number 1. Sorry, I said assignment number 4, I meant assignment number 2, because you can actually use a lot of this material in assignment number 1 to help you with assignment number 2. And it's only 10%, so whatever you do not worry. Use everything you have, use everything you've learned, and I think you'll find it an easy and enjoyable assignment. Thanks, everybody.